Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you for spending this time with me, this 1 hour on your Saturday. I know your Saturdays are very busy, so I do appreciate the time that you're spending here for us to go ahead and change the world. So, anyhow, I am glad to be back after 2 weeks of playing my KPFT shows here at Politics Done Right with Coffee Party. Had several issues several things that we had to be doing. Actually, it was a pretty great time. I went ahead and got some interviews with Dr. Richard Wolff, who is an economist that believes in policies that forward the will or forward what's best for the middle class. I also had interviews with Chris Hedges. In fact, I was a master of ceremonies at the Houston Peace and Justice Center, where their the actual guest host, and not only the award winner, was Chris Hedges. I know everyone knows who Chris Hedges is. It's that that activist that's out there really trying to do what's right for us all, because that's what we're doing. Anyhow, remember, folks, I am on Periscope, so Egberto Willies is the Twitter account the Twitter call name for Periscope. Go ahead and make sure and make your comments. Talk to me. Whatever you tell me on Periscope, I'll put on air as well. Remember, this show is podcast, and it's actually seen by several thousands every week. So be aware of that your voice has value. Your voice does have value. Anyhow, what are we going to talk about today? Of course you know what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the refugee crisis, the reaction by many in the United States, the fearmongering by many in the United States. Folks, when are we going to grow up? When are we going to actually see things for what they are? When are we going to stop allowing others to manipulate our minds? When are we going to be the ones who really decide our own destiny? We have to get to this place, and we need to get there in a hurry. The plutocracy is doing what it needs to do to keep our minds under control, and in so doing, they are destroying the middle class. They are destroying the poor. They are destroying lo que es America. They are destroying America. I shouldn't say they are destroying America. They're destroying the concept of what America is supposed to be. So please, folks, do remember this is a call-in show. It is Coffee Party Radio. It is Politics Done Right, this time on Coffee Party. And I can be reached by phone. We can get you on air here at 646-929-2495. Again, that number, slowly. Some people tell me sometimes I get excited and speak a bit too fast. 646-929-2495. I'm about to open the chat room. Can you believe I forgot to open the chat room? Folks, the chat room is now, wait a minute. The chat room is also now open. So if you want to talk to me, you can speak to me by chat. You can speak to me by Twitter, Egberto Willies. You can speak to me on Periscope, Egberto Willies. You can speak to me by call-in, 646-929-2495. 2495. And by the way, when I say speak to me, I mean speak to our audience that belongs to us all. Anyway, folks, the title of the show today is what is the title of the show? It's Call Out Fearmongers Loudly and Frequently. Refugees not a threat. Do you believe that? Do you believe that the refugees are a threat to us all? Do you think there is really a problem? Well, folks, we don't. Anyhow, going into what I want to talk about, President Obama called out the rampant fear-mongering. He called out Republicans and the irrational actions by many governors of both parties throughout the country. There is an irrational fear of the Syrian refugees, folks. Sadly, the irrational fear is being stoked by many in the right wing, unfortunately. Many are acquiescing to the bigotry instead of fighting it. 47 Democrats joined Republicans to make it virtually impossible for Syrian refugees to emigrate to the United States. It is time for average American citizens to call out the demagogues and ensure that they pay the price for their bigotry. What are your thoughts? Let's talk, folks. I will also be following our hashtag Politics Done Right on Twitter. Egberto Willies is a Twitter handle. Give me a call to the number to call by phone, 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. And of course, after the show, you can listen to the podcast or you can watch the vlogcast. And the vlogcast is pretty much the copy of what we're talking here via Periscope. We are also broadcasting live on Periscope, handled Egberto Willies. So, folks, let's have a show. I hope to hear from you either in the chat rooms or elsewhere.
It's time for the weekly blog post.
I will be frank. When I was preparing the show and I decided to do the show, I had to decide if I had to write a new blog post, and I said to myself, well, earlier this week I wrote one on what the president had to say, and what the president had to say was quite a bit more eloquent than I would have written. After all, the guy is good, the guy has his writers, the guy has all these people working for him. So after I read the blog post, I hope to hear from you guys. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. And I see 210 is up to call in. I think that's my friend John. John, I'll come to you right after the quick blog of the week. Here we go, folks. The title of the blog: President Obama lashed out at governors and fear-mongering GOP candidates on Syrian refugee crisis. Here it goes. I subtitle it: President Obama slams those playing politics with Syrian refugee crisis. Here we go. President Obama did not pull any punches when he went after governors and fear-mongering GOP candidates playing politics with the Syrian refugee crisis. Before he went into the dignified tongue lashing, he explained the situation. If we had a real mainstream media, enough people would hear the message to inoculate them from the buffoonery of the right. The president first explained why it is understandable that Americans would be affected by the events in Paris. He said the similarities of Paris and the life within is simply what we live. It's similar to what we live. He said it is important that Americans remain vigilant and understand that we cannot be complacent. The president alluded to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security as one of the proactive tools to keep Americans safe. Anyhow, President Obama then explains why the grandstanding and bigotry affected by the GOP candidates is counterproductive. We are not well served when, in response to a terrorist attack, we descend into fear and panic. Obama said, we don't make good decisions if it is based on hysteria or an exaggeration of risk. I think the refugee debate is an example of us not being well served by some of the commentary that's been taking place by officials back home and in the media, so said Obama. The president then explained that under current law, the extensive background check process can take 18 to 24 months. He said he was all ears for anyone who believed they have a better process. He then castigates the GOP candidates. When candidates say, we don't want to admit 3-year-old orphans, Obama said, that's political posturing. When individuals say that we should have a religious test and that only Christians, proven Christians, should be admitted, that is offensive and contrary to Americans' values. I cannot think of a more potent recruitment tool for ISIL than some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of here during the course of this debate. ISIL seeks to exploit the idea that there is a war between Islam and the West. Hello, my friend from Russia. Great to see you there. I'm glad to have you in the house. And when you start seeing individuals in positions of responsibility suggesting that Christians are more worthy of protection than Muslims or in a war-torn land that feeds the ISIL narrative, it is counterproductive. The president then went into full mocking mode, similar to what he did a few days ago on grandstanding politicians. He said the Republican candidates are tough with their rhetoric, yet scared of debate moderators and orphan children, as they believed they had the fortitude to stare down Mr. Putin. You would find that quite interesting, my Russian Periscope listener. President Obama said the behavior of the obstructionists is irresponsible, and I think all of us here concurs. They concur. They have been playing on fear in order to try to score political points or to advance their campaigns, and it is irresponsible. It is contrary to who we are, and it needs to stop, because you know what? El mundo está mirando. The world is watching. Folks, what do you think? Give me a call. The telephone number is 281. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the other call-in number. The call-in number for today is 646-929-2495. And I'll start the call-ins with my good friend, I think this is his number, John. Come on in, John.
Yeah, good afternoon, Egberto.
How are you doing this morning, sir? Or this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm going to go ahead and start off with Eric Erickson. I don't know if you heard his quote that he said, but I think it kind of exemplifies the fear that's instilled in people. He says, I'm really glad I didn't get tickets to opening day to see Star Wars. Seriously, I have no confidence in this administration to keep us safe, particularly in light of President Obama's statement today that there's really no way to stop this stuff. There are no metal detectors at American theaters. I'll wait till Star Wars is less of a threat scenario. So,
you know, I heard about that statement, and you know what? The first thing that crossed my mind, these are the same guys who want everybody armed when they go into these places. They fear these refugees more than they fear that single guy that's going to be in there doing harm.
Right, and the state he lives in, which is Georgia, he lives in Atlanta, has the most lax gun law. They just passed that law. It's essentially called a guns everywhere
right.
law. Right, so to where people, you know, were literally going to Little League baseball games and had guns out, and all these people called into the police, and they're like, well, what can we do? That this new law was passed. I mean, he can have his open gun out, you know, and I mean, that just shows the absurdity of it. Now, when I called into your show on KPFT on Thursday, I was mentioning, you know, the fact that one in 26 people, no, 26 people rather die a year
Right.
from being struck by a lightning. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that is the key figure because the chances of you being struck by lightning are about 1 in 5 million in any given year. Okay, and so we've had the same 26 people die from jihadi attacks, and these are like the Nadal Hassan attacks
Right.
and the Boston bomber. So I mean, in 13 years since 9/11, we've also had 26 people. So the odds of that, if you times 14 times 5 million, it would be 1 in 70 million that you're going to die of a terror attack.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, that is just so overwhelming. It is unbelievable. And also, I want to call out Rubio because his statement was just unbelievable when he said on Sunday morning, "This is a clash of civilizations." I mean, he actually said that.
Right.
I mean, that is the most dangerous thing you could possibly say. I mean,
John, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going crazy, but I mean, I am trying to figure out. Look, we understand that support small businesses. Yes, this is, I think, American Express Day to support small businesses, and we will support small businesses. Thank you, Periscope caller. Anyhow, yeah, John, help me out here. What are these guys expecting? I mean, do these guys expect to use this same type of rhetoric, whomever it is that wins the Republican primary? How do you go through the main race with stuff like this? And the other thing that I want to ask you, and you tell me from what you are seeing out there, because I don't see it. You know, I'm very, very hard on the media. You're nowhere close as hard on the media as I am. But the question is, why is it that these, not even necessarily the journalists, but why is it the opinion folks, the sensible ones, aren't really making this the huge issue that it really is?
Oh, I mean, all I can say is it's just fear. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think most of the people, obviously, on the left are. But, I mean, if you look at why the 47 Democratic, congressmen
Right.
in the House voted for it, I think, what Steve Israel, I've lost a tremendous amount of respect for
I was
that
shocked.
man.
I'm going to tell you something, John. I wrote a blog piece on my faileddemocrats.com website. And I said I wrote a piece. I shouldn't even take credit for writing the piece. I copy and pasted all the Democrats, the 47 Democrats with their Facebook and Twitter handles from Huffington Post into a blog post and wrote a little quick editorial on it and sent it out. I was so upset. I didn't really want to write anything too extensive about it, but I have all 47 out there for folks to go harass them now, because what they did is shame. What is it? Should I say shameful or shameless or both? Because I know why they did it. Okay, John, we understand why they did it. Why they did it is they figure it is easier to do that so that those 30-second commercials won't say what we know they're going to say. My response to that is it is time for us to stop acquiescing to the crap and actually start engaging people and doing what politicking is all about. Making your call, making your decision, and going out there and defending it and speaking to your constituents. Do not undermine the intelligence of your constituents. What Israel did was exactly that. Undermine the intelligence of his constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was shocked that Lloyd Doggett actually voted for it.
Austin...
Gene Green in your area, he
Yes.
voted for it. I mean, Louise Slaughter, who's always been a good progressive, voted for it. It is shocking. But, I mean, it's like the vote for the war, in 2002.
Right.
I mean, they feel like that the public wanted, and I mean, the opinion polls, the first one I think was 56%
Right.
were in favor. There's a newer one that said 53. So momentum's already moving away from this,
Right.
in my opinion,
I-
and I hope it continues.
But I think we have to somehow hold these guys. Periscope user that keeps saying socialism is bad, please keep saying it as long as you want. The reality is I don't think you understand what socialism is, Mr. Periscope. And for the other persons, if Periscope folks have some questions, just type in the questions and I'll be happy to put it on air. Otherwise, please do remember this is a call-in show, so you can be on air live at 646-929-2495. I would love to hear from more of you. 646-929-2495. John and I have the proclivity, the possibility, the ability to talk for hours. We'd love to hear other opinions coming in. So that number is 646-929-2495, or on Periscope, Egberto Willies is the handle to get on Periscope and post your questions and watch me as I do this show, as we listen to other people here. Let me ask you, I'm keeping you hot, John, and let me bring in 412. 412, who do I have the honor of speaking with?
Hi, Berto. It's Greg in Pittsburgh. How are you?
My dear brother Greg, how are you doing, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Good. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Doing well. Doing well. I had a question about the Democrats that you're talking about that voted for something that is apparently, and again, I'm out of the loop on this. So can you fill us in on what you're talking about? Is this about some sort of a refugee?
Yeah. What happens is,
and where are they located? Where are they located? What states are they in? Are they mostly red states? I was curious about that too.
Well, the Texans are in red states, but we have Israel. John, where's Israel from again?
He's from New York State.
Right, New York. We have them from red states, blue states. I mean, we have governors from blue states that said they won't be taking refugees. It is crazy. Now, with the bill that you're speaking about is 4038, HR 4038. And what HR 4038 is pretty much doing is it asking all these head guys in the departments to certify that these particular refugees are 100% cleared to come to the United States. And I mean, it is ridiculous. I mean, it's a short bill.
I did hear that one. Yeah, I heard about that, and when I heard about the need for agency heads to personally certify, I thought to myself, this really has kind of jumped the shark tank once again. I just don't see how that's even I don't see how that's even a reasonable thing to consider, let alone try and turn into a rule that has to be followed. That's just
it makes no sense. Now it's interesting because yesterday there is a woman, a Muslim woman. Her name is Dalia. What was her name? Dalia Mogahed. She went on and Chuck Todd asked her that typical question that every Muslim that goes onto TV has to answer, and that is, hey Muslim people, why don't you speak out some more when all these terrorists are acting? And she watched as Chuck Todd asked the question. I'm going to put your mic off for a minute, Greg, because a lot of movement is heard. Anyhow, this lady Mogahed, every Muslim that goes on to, whether it's liberal or progressive TV or right-wing TV, has to answer the same question. Hey, Muslim person, you know all those terrorists out there that are killing people that are Muslims? Why aren't you speaking out louder, Mr. Muslim or Mrs. Muslim? Isn't that your response? Thank you for all the love from Periscope, folks. Shouldn't you be speaking out against that? Well, no. I love the way she answered it. I wrote a blog piece about it, and folks, it would be great to get to either egbertowillies.com or Coffee Party USA Coffee Party page where I placed the blog, and she calmly said that when, first of all, the majority of all terrorism that has been occurring in the United States in the last several years have been done by Christians, mostly white Christians, and mostly young white Christian men. And she said, nobody is asking Christians in general, white men in particular, to have any sense of responsibility or that they have to speak out against those individuals, those rogue individuals that are committing these terroristic acts. So it is unfair for anyone to ask the average Muslim citizen that they somehow must feel the pain or feel the responsibility that there are a whole lot of rogue Muslim terrorists doing certain things. That doesn't affect the mostly most of the 1.x billion Muslims around the world that are living their lives and who just want to live. Most people, I don't care your religion, whomever, atheist, otherwise, most people just want to live. That's all they want. They want to live in peace and do their thing. Look, I find it ironic, and I'm going on a little soapbox here, folks, because I need to, because narrative is everything. Narrative is absolutely everything. When we heard about Israel and the last, not the Intifada, but the last set of problems in Israel, the count was something like 3,000 Palestinians dead and I think 100 Israelis dead. But somehow the narrative around the world, placed out by the U.S. news and the U.S. news and Israeli news and elsewhere, was that the Palestinians were these great offenders. Now, I'm not taking sides on Israel or Palestine, though when I'm not on air, I do have a side to take because of specifics, but I won't here. But here's the deal. How do you look at the proportionality there and see on one side 3,000 people dead, on the other side 100 persons dead, and somehow the massive aggressor, the ones who care nothing about life, is the one whose country or whose territory has the 3,000 dead? Narrative is everything. How can America as a country, we had 120, how many people did these criminals kill? 130 people dead. Yes, that's horrendous, that's terrible, that's criminal, that's terrorism. But look on the other side of how indiscriminate bombing by different Western countries in these lands. And this, I want to be clear here. I am not protecting, I am not defending terrorism by any means. I am just saying, in reporting, in analyzing, in looking at results, we have to be honest with looking at what is going on. A dead person knows not anything but being dead. The family of a dead person only knows one thing: my relative, my sister, my brother, my aunt, my mother is dead. That's all they know. Now, if you are in Syria, if you are in Iran, if you are in Afghanistan, if you are in any one of these countries where we bomb indiscriminately, and yes, we get a whole lot of terrorists in the bombing, but in the process we kill thousands of innocent civilians. Who is the bad person to that person's family who was killed by some other power for doing nothing wrong? We have to look at things objectively. We must look at things objectively. Because when we see other people doing things to us, ask, what have we done to them? And this is not taking sides. This is just asking us to be honest. Now, what I've told many people, and John, you've heard this on my KPFT show, I was very distinct about it. There are many ways to handle the current problems that we have that doesn't require the bombing the holy hell out of these lands. In fact, I cannot see. I'm an engineer. I'm an activist. I'm a radio host. I write. I cannot see what more bombing is going to do. But I can tell you one thing. There's one thing that I do know. I do know that none of those terrorists know how to make a gun. I do know that none of those terrorists know how to make ammunition. I know none of them know how to make a tank. None of them knows how to make a tank. All these armaments are made in Western countries. So these armaments are being provided by Western businesses, by the plutocracy around the world, not the U.S. plutocracy, the United States plutocracy, the Israeli plutocracy, the Brazilian plutocracy, the Uzbekistan plutocracy, the Russian plutocracy. They are all providing the weapons to these terrorists. A lot of the monies for these weapons are coming from the people that we so defend, Saudi Arabia. And then the same armament manufacturers or the suppliers of them thereof are then selling these same bombs and missiles and arms and all these other things to the Americans, to the French, and all these other countries. So the gun dealers are making it at both ends. They supply the person who are blowing the terrorists up, and they supply the terrorists. And we are simply the pawns that go out there and use the armament that they create, that gets blown up, that needs to be replaced again and again and again. You want to stop the wars? You want to stop the terrorists? Cut the supply of arms. And it's not difficult to do so. Cut the supply of arms. Let me bring John back in if you want to add to that, John.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit where I disagree with you, and I think you were getting a little bit of pushback later on in the show in the KPFT.
Yes, I did.
Okay, the first thing is, as far as the bombing, I'm sure you're aware of that, before all of this happened, actually on the same day, Sinjar was retaken by the Kurds in Iraq. The Sinjar, which was the original place where the Yazidis went in last August and went up the mountain, and that's
waited.
We got involved, and we got involved in the first that. So that was actually taken back by the Kurds, and the Kurds, the military officials said that basically that the bombing, they couldn't have done it without the American bombing. So I mean, that's one point.
Before you go to the next point, I want to address that because you're correct, okay? And I don't want to in what I said, I don't want to sound absolutist. I think if you had listened to I think you were listening to the KPFT show. I also said that I wasn't a pacifist, but what I want are solutions, and that the bombing in that manner, right? In other words, we had the Kurds on the ground. They could tell us places where these guys were out there and they needed to get there. So yes, that is justified. In other words, the Kurds say, hey, we are going to take this. We have to take this. The terrorists are held up in this particular area. You bomb it, you soften it up, we go in and take it. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is what we tend to do. That's not what we tend to do. We tend to go half-cocked and just look. I am speaking from the point of view of a person who is from another country, Panama, and watch as George H.W. Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, bombed the holy hell out of Panama, a country that has no army, no navy. Had no navy, no air force. They tested the stealth fighters out there. They annihilated 3 cities, David, Colon, and Panama cities. These areas where the militaries were, and indiscriminately killed thousands. Reported it as 1,000. So I mean, I'm talking from a point of view that understands what goes on, not from what's reported here in the United States, but what actually happened on the ground. So, but I'm with you. I really do not believe we have a disagreement where it comes to where military is effective as it was with the Kurds and the Yazidis. I really think that's fine, but this indiscriminate bombing is what I'm talking about. So please continue, my friend.
Right. Okay, well, let me also make my other point. The point is the fact is that they have been losing territory. ISIL in Iraq has been losing territory, and I mean, I'm not saying no, people do talk about it, but I mean, this should be talked about more often. They've lost 25% of their territory since they hit their peak, okay? Right. And so so we are making progress. So when all the Republicans say to Obama that he's not doing anything, I mean, progress is being made, and it's going to continue to happen. I mean, they cut down their supply lines from Mosul to Raqqa. That was their main supply line. Now that's cut off. And so a lot of terrorism experts say that this is actually lashing out. In other words, their whole 6 months ago, they didn't want to make these spectacular attacks in the West. They thought that was Al-Qaeda's game, and they've gone beyond Al-Qaeda. What we want to do is take over territory and hold the territory. Well, they're not able to hold the territory anymore. They're losing at their own game that they've described. And so now they're going to the West, and they're lashing out. And it's horrible for people in the West. But let's put it in perspective. Another thing you said about the arms, I disagree with you in the sense that, 11 countries in Africa manufacture their own arms. It is not that difficult to manufacture small arms. I'm not saying that ISIL does this, but what they do is, they do take over when they take over the military, they take all of their weapons also.
Right.
And so, like, when they took over Mosul, they took over the bank, and that bank had $400 million in it, all the different banks in Mosul. And so, how they get funded is actually taking territory.
John, I think I honestly, again, when we talk, sometimes I think every so often we talk past each other, and more than likely that is because maybe I sound a little bit too absolutist in some of the statements that I make. But I can't really argue or contest anything that you said, because everything that you've said is correct. Now, there's one thing that let me qualify something about the 11 countries in Africa that makes weapons. If we were talking about those types of weapons, I wouldn't have a problem. The kinds of weapons that I'm concerned about are the big weapons, and these African countries do not make the big weapons. They don't make the weapons that that can be existential to smaller countries or anything like that. So that is what I'm talking about. And when it comes to the territory, if you remember, and I think I don't know if you've read the blog that I wrote about, in fact, leading from behind. I continue to say, yes, President Obama, please do lead from behind. And not only that, President Obama's comment about ISIS being contained, as you just alluded to, is in fact a fact. ISIS is contained territorially. They are contained, and the fact that you've stated 25% of their land that they had before is no longer theirs, yes, it is contained and shrinking. So I don't think there's much of a difference here between what we are saying. Again, I said maybe it just happens to be the absolutist nature that sometimes I come across with. Let me see if yeah, go ahead, sir.
Well, I think we agree on our objective. Our objective is to have peace in the world.
Right.
And to have, but I think where we do disagree is I think that ISIL is, is more of a not necessarily a threat to Americans, but they do have, even though they're losing ground in Iraq, and I don't think they're necessarily they are in Syria, but they're getting ground in southern Syria, losing ground in northern Syria. But I think that did you feel like that they're not really, that it would be simple to completely overcome this?
No, I don't. Let me tell you what I do think. Let me tell you what I do think. First of all, I don't think ISIS is ISIL or Daesh is an existential threat to any part of Western society, Western countries at all. I think the existential threat to Western countries or Western countries' reaction to ISIL. That is my honest thought. But I'm not saying that you're not going to get 129 folks killed here or 50 people in Houston killed there. Because here's the interesting thing about what they're doing. If you're programming folk, if you're programming the disaffected, like those people who've been disaffected right now, to say, hey, you can be a part of this world taking over the world, go kill 20 people in your city. There is no fighting against that. I mean, you don't even have to have a standing army to do that. You don't have to have, and that is where I'm coming from. My thing is, this is going to sound kind of interesting, but what the Republicans are doing right now, and some Democrats in the statements that they're making, when folks say that is exactly what ISIL wants, I say it's deeper than that. That is what ISIL needs. ISIL need disaffected people to say, why would I stay with the West? Why not inflict damage on the West? Because look at how I am treated. I am a nobody. Well, look, I'm a somebody. Look at what I can do. I mean, ISIS as a military force, unless one of them get a piece of nuclear material, but then again, that isn't relegated to only ISIS. Any lone wolf can get themselves on enough nuclear material to effect damage on any city in this country. It doesn't require an ISIL structure. And I guess what concerns me most, John, is that we make ISIS appear as an intelligentsia, a great power of intelligence and social. What they are is getting a lot of good social media kids to make productions. And yes, they have arms. They are a band of thugs. I think to give them more, they're not a state. They're not, they cannot operate in civil society as a whole, because civil society is interconnected with banking, etc., etc. What we have are Western appeasers, Westerners who allow them to exist. Let's look at an example of how they're funded with oil. They sell their oil on the black market. Who buys the oil on the black market? You see the kinds of things that I'm talking about?
Right. No, I agree.
If we really wanted to isolate these guys, we would isolate them. But I bet if you were to get a list of all the people that are helping ISIS, you will see that it's more Westerners than anybody else. Yeah, they're thugs, they're Western thugs, but they're helping the existence of these guys as well. And when I put the blame on arm manufacturers as well, my thing is that our capitalist structure encourages that kind of behavior, because a sale is a sale is a sale. John, let me see if Greg wants to add anything here. And by the way, folks, the telephone number is 646-929-2495. I see more people online, but not pressing the number 1 to speak. If you want to speak, please press the number 1. If you have any messages on Periscope you want to get over, just type it in and I'll speak to it on air. So, Greg, I'm coming to you right now. Is there anything that you want to add? I had to turn your mic off.
Actually, I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is the role that our foreign policy has, not in creating the terrorists themselves, but creating the opportunity for them to come out from the shadows. Mm-hmm. There was a really interesting article this past week in The Atlantic called "What Does ISIS Want?"
Yes.
I would encourage everyone to go take a look at that article. I found it to be really educational and informative, and it pointed out certain realities that I don't think we in the West, at least I certainly didn't understand and appreciate, and that is that in terms of what that leadership is trying to do, they don't recognize things that we recognize in the West, like state borders and boundaries. There's a lot of hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth on the right about things like Sharia law, but that is actually what ISIS is attempting to create, is a caliphate that's ruled by the strictest of Muslim law, that is their interpretation of the Quran. That's important to appreciate. It's their interpretation, and it's not about state boundaries. It's not even about geopolitics. That's not what these people think about. It's not what motivates them. It's not what drives their strategies.
Exactly.
Their strategies are to and this is actually, and again, this is part of the article, at least the way I read it. Their strategy is to either draw their fellow Muslims into line or eliminate them. Because what they don't do is they don't kill Christians so long as the Christians are willing to be subjugated by them. They're not looking at this as a war of religion against Christianity. What they're actually trying to create is a pure Muslim state, the way that they interpret the Quran, and it's really their fellow Muslims who are at greatest risk. And I think if you look at most of the reports or stats that I seem to think I know is that they kill far more Muslims.
That you are so right, and that has been the case for quite a long time, Greg. I'll be honest with you, okay? There are some of these guys in ISIS that, and this I don't have any evidence, that I haven't done any interviews or anything like this, but this is just knowing how a lot of these things operate. But I imagine there are some folks that are devout Muslims who want a particular sect of Islam to be the ruling sect. But I imagine some as well are just your good old thugs who want power. The guys who killed those people in Paris were just common thugs, and they tagged on to that ideology to effect their thuggery. Now, then, of course, there are those who are just in it to make the money. So I think just like here in the United States, we have great politicians that are in it for the people, and we have most politicians that are just in it for being in it. And then we have a few of them that are just thugs. So, it runs the whole gamut. But the thing about it is, I think it is important for all of us, John, Greg, and all of us to go out there and stop allowing that narrative to really, first of all, demean all these people that are Muslims. I wrote this piece this morning. Finally, Harry Smith came out and he said he decided to start. He spoke a little bit about the media bias that there is over the coverage of Paris versus Lebanon and these other places, and so it is interesting that has occurred. Folks, the telephone number is 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495 if you want to be on air so folks would hear your lovely voices. And of course, here on Periscope, Egberto Willies is the Periscope handle. I see I have people on Periscope. Remember, you have questions on Periscope. Please feel free to type them out, and I can ask them of the guests on hand, or I can just say, if you want to just throw your opinion out there, type it in, and I'll be sure to get your opinion on air with your handle. Anyhow, John, any other further comments?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what you were saying about actually trying to shut down the networks. Now, the UN did have a vote, and it was passed 15-0 yesterday. And the Russians before had always been kind of holding up. Obviously, they want Assad to stay in power.
Right.
And most experts say that the real tipping point is going to be when they actually recognize that Assad has to leave. Of course, there's another faction that says the only way that it's going to be stable is if Assad stays.
Right.
But but anyway, the point is when you talk about, like you talked about Turkey on your KPFT show.
Right.
Turkey has actually been really turning their backs on what's been going on. Like if you see how people are actually getting to Syria, almost all of them are going through Turkey.
Right.
And everybody, who follows this, knows kind of the double game, just like the double game that the Pakistanis have been playing.
Right.
Playing the West against each other. They're doing the same thing now because their real enemies are the Kurds. And the Kurds are the ones that are actually gaining ground.
Exactly.
Like, when the Kurds took Kobani, they took another city. And there's a good article in The Guardian a couple of days ago that talks about this. And they're saying that the real problem is the Kurds. And then, of course, you have all the money that's coming, if not from the Saudi government, from other people, rich individuals, Saudi citizens, and that's not being stopped either. In fact, the article is called "Turkey could cut off Islamic State supply line, so why doesn't it?" And it's by David Graebner, and he talks about how there were two cities that they took. Kobani was one of them, and this other city, Jarablus, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that would be the last city on the Turkish border, and they basically bombed the Kurds. I mean, so you have we're working with the Kurds, America, to try to fight ISIS, and Turkey is fighting against the Kurds. And so, I mean, we have this kind of duplicity all over in Yemen also, where you got civil wars that's on a proxy war. And so it's extremely complicated situation. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. If people like, Saudi Arabia and all the other, smaller states, United Arab Emirates and all the other ones, would stop supplying, would really crack down on people giving money. But, I mean, that's not happening. It's just like Bernie saying, we should have a we should have a coalition of Arab states. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, that's what we should push for. Yes. But it's not happening. It's not. They don't want to do it. And so, that's where we're at. That's the realistic step that we're at right now. Right. And so I mean, it's a very tough situation. I don't think it's something that is simple at all. And I just I'm just hoping in Iraq they can ISIS will continue to lose territory. I mean, they're already they control.
I'll tell you something, John. Right? I think I have some problems with the president on some of his policies. Okay, I really do. But this is quite interesting because what I find is that he starts unless he gets so much pressure from not only his left but from the masses in general, he kind of have a way of being quiet and sticking the course irrespective to what people say. And I think this leading from behind has the potential to get some stuff done. I mean, like you mentioned about the 25% of land that is actually being that is no longer under ISIS control. That isn't very well reported. When he took a lot of flack for saying, "Oh, these guys have been contained territorially," all these things that he's doing just methodically behind the scenes, not to have a huge bombing war like most Republicans would like to have, including likely boots on the ground shortly. I think it's a good thing in a lot of ways. A lot of times I say, at this point in time, it's a good thing that this man is the president. Sadly, whether it is Hillary Clinton or some other one, any one of the Republicans, we are going to war. Now, if for some reason we get the revolution going, or the revolution gets going and somehow a Bernie gets elected, in as much as Bernie has been trying to sound a tad bit more hawkish than he normally does, I think he would be the type to have a more Obama-like policy that inflicts less damage. I mean, even Obama I think is inflicting more damage than I would want to see to get this stuff under control. But hey, less damage is always better.
Yeah, I mean, what they need to do is actually confront Erdogan in Turkey.
Yes.
They need to confront him and say, let's stop this. I mean, I don't hear people saying that. I mean, I was hearing Marcy Wheeler on a podcast, and she was talking about the Saudis, and she was saying the reason we're not getting tough with the Saudis, even though the Saudi royal family would say that Obama has gotten tough with them compared to other leaders, and they don't like Obama at all.
Right.
But is because the CIA has been so close to the Saudis for many years, and they're the ones that saying no, we've got to stick with the Saudis. And and so there's a lot of different layers to this onion.
Exactly.
And so I mean, obviously, we want the same thing. But I mean, I do feel getting back a little bit back to politics and with Bernie really needs to. I mean, I know this kind of is seen as kind of is counterintuitive, but I think he needs to really go hard on the differences between Hillary and himself.
Exactly.
because right now, I mean, she actually turned around from the debate, and she's going into this more hawkish stance. I read that thing on your KPFT show. That was the day of it, and so now, you know, she's not gone as far as the Republicans, but she wants more boots on the ground. You know, she's saying we should be the leaders, and Bernie needs to say no, we shouldn't be the leaders.
And you know what? It's so scary.
This should be a world.
She doesn't understand what she is doing. I mean, it's like she doesn't remember 2008. It is okay for her. I mean, what she doesn't realize, right, is right now we are still in a frenzy right after those 129 people have been killed. But if Americans have a very, very short memory. And when this stuff washes away and when this stuff is gone, they're no longer going to be in this hawkish mode. Right now, Americans are scared because of what they saw in Paris. They won't be scared come election time. And when I'm talking about election time, I'm talking primary election time. When this stuff down and we don't have the 24/7 coverage anymore about Paris on air, and she comes out sounding very hawkish, that'll actually be the door for Bernie Sanders. And I don't think that Bernie Sanders people aren't actually looking at that. Somebody is saying that I'm not scared he's ready, or you mean that you're not sure if Bernie Sanders is ready? Let me tell you, the president, and being the president, you're the president, rather you run the presidency, and the presidency has all the resources. The only reason that George Bush or a Ronald Reagan could have been president is that they weren't really, they didn't have to know much. There's a presidency around you, and as long as you have basic intelligence, you can be a president. Now, being a good president requires skills. That means you have good intuitive skills, and otherwise, something that I think President Obama, President Carter, President Herbert Walker Bush, I think as well, was an intelligent guy that kind of, people don't like when I say that. I see what you're saying there. I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, Periscope. Yeah. But anyhow, give me your closing statement, John. We got to get out of here.
Okay, well, I mean, it's with Hillary, you know, with the gaffe she had at the debate about the 9/11 and the helping people with 9/11 with the Wall Street, I mean, the non sequitur that was, and also I think with her little bit of, with her hawkish views that came out a couple of days ago, I think Bernie is slightly creeping up.
Yes, I don't.
Poll in New Hampshire.
Let me tell you,
within one. I mean, he's coming back up.
John,
again,
I gotta go to Greg, but you're absolutely right, and I tell you something better. Remember that at this time during the last election, 2008, the poll numbers for Hillary weren't all that much different. So hey, for those who want Bernie still has a good chance. Greg, give me your closer, Greg.
My closer would be to plead with my fellow Americans to stop being such cowards. What happens in Paris at the hands of a few radicals is not reason to go to war. It's not reason to close our borders. It's not reason to live your life in fear. Get rid of the fear. Realize that the world cannot be a perfect place. You will never have 100% security
90
unless you
seconds.
just barricade yourself in your home. And who wants to do that? Thanks, Roberto.
Thank you very much, Greg. That was an excellent statement. Folks, please remember, next week we'll be back with Politics Done Right. And do remember that my show, Politics Done Right, on KPFT is on Thursdays at 3 p.m. on 90.1 FM in Houston, Texas, or at kpft.org if you're streaming it outside of the Houston metropolitan area. Look, we have to get busy. We have to get to work.
60 seconds.
It is time that Americans wake up. As Greg said, it is time for us to forget the fears. And as John said, we must act. This is Politics Done Right. I'm honored that you spent this time with me. Till next week, Politics Done Right is out. My name is Egberto Willis, and c'est la vie. Hablo más tarde con mi gente. Ciao. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.